What's good? It's Woog. I don't know about y'all, but I'm pretty excited about this upcoming 154-pound title clash between Israil Madrimov, 10 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw, defending his WBA 154-pound title against Terence Crawford, 40 wins and 0 losses, with 31 of those 40 wins coming via knockout, including all 8 of his welterweight fights. So all of his welterweight fights resulted in a knockout, and in totality, he's on an 11-fight knockout streak. The last person to go the distance with Terence Crawford was Victor Postal back in 2016. So Crawford's obviously one of the best fighters of the generation. He has long been considered a top 3 pound for pound fighter. Some people have had him at 1, some people have had him between 1 and 2, 1 and 3. Right now, as it stands, it's pretty much either Crawford, Naoya Inoue, or Alexander Usyk. I don't really mind any variation of how you want to order those 3. Personally, I've got Terence Crawford at 1, I've got Usyk at 2, and I've got Inoue at 3. Now, I understand if you have issue with that, but I'm basically looking at the quality of opponents, and unfortunately that matters. So on one hand, you've got Usyk, who's, toppled Anthony Joshua twice after becoming undisputed at cruiserweight, just beat Tyson Fury, and I just look at beating AJ and Fury as being better than beating Luis Neri and Stephen Fulton. Great wins, obviously great wins, but it's just hard for me to place Inoue over both Usyk and Crawford. But again, I won't argue with anybody who is placing Naoya Inoue at number 1. And plus, the way that Inoue's been winning his fights has been spectacular. He's been winning in the most impressive way out of those 3 guys, even though, again, Terence Crawford is on this 11-fight knockout streak. But Terence Crawford, incredible fighter, right? Over the years, we saw him win the belt against Ricky Burns at 135. We saw him become undisputed at 140. I remember when I first started taking real note of Terence Crawford, it was when he got that opportunity against Breidis Prescott back in 2013. At the time, and for the next few fights that followed against Andre Klimov, even the title win against Ricky Burns, I thought Terence Crawford was really good. I had no idea he was going to turn out to be a generational fighter. But as you continue to watch him fight over fight, seeing him against all different types of fighters, short, quick fighters like Yuriorkis Gamboa, long, rangy boxers like Victor Postal, Olympians, gold medalists like Felix Diaz, and then debuting at 147 against Jeff Horn, who had a very good fight, beat Manny Pacquiao, somewhat controversially, or at least disputedly, right? But to see Terence Crawford totally have his way with Jeff Horn, you saw the admiration of Terence Crawford just growing fight over fight to where he became like the fight fans fighter, where you saw him ascending up that pound for pound ranking a lot faster than his fame and crossover stardom was growing. He was really, really good before he was famous. And you could still argue that his fame and his stardom has never caught up to how good and great he is. Like, he's kind of the opposite of a Ryan Garcia. Not to say Garcia is not good or very, very talented, but accomplishments wise, guys like Ryan Garcia or Edgar Berlanga, who looks like he's gonna get this next Canelo shot. You've got guys who get kind of famous before they are proven to be really good. Nah, Terence Crawford had to get his from the mud, if you will, and had to show out fight over fight, year after year, become champion at 135, undisputed 140, getting blocked out of the fights that matter for years at welterweight before he finally got that first. He got the Sean Porter fight, competitive fight. He ended up being the first and only person to stop Sean Porter, and then 2 fights later, finally getting the opportunity against the man at welterweight for this past generation, Errol Spence Jr. And that was Terence Crawford's true crowning moment. That was the fight, probably the biggest fight of the past few years. Yes, in retrospect, it ended up being a non-competitive fight, but in terms of the importance of any one particular fight, I mean, you could argue Tyson Fury versus Usyk is up there with Spence Crawford in terms of the importance. But the public's got a short memory, and yeah, a lot of us walked away from Spence versus Crawford shrugging our shoulders like, damn, I guess this whole time it wasn't competitive. Well, don't forget where you were and what you were thinking going into that fight. That was the 50-50 fight in terms of how it was sold, how it was portrayed. I mean, even the betting odds were nearly even. Well, we got what we got. And yes, there will also be people who will say Errol Spence, it turned out, was impacted by that devastating car accident, or with the retina tear, or any one of the numerous things that had happened to Errol Spence over the past few years leading up to that Terence Crawford fight. There will be some people who think that Spence was diminished, but then others will say, well, at any point of Spence's career, if he were to have locked horns with Terence Crawford because of styles, Crawford would always beat Errol Spence. I'll just tell you, as I was watching the fight, I was in awe. Look, I picked Crawford to win by knockout, actually, but to see that fight play out, to see Spence hit the canvas in the early rounds and then get dropped badly in the middle rounds and just get pummeled by the time we were into the 4th, 5th, and 6th round, to where it was one-way traffic. That was pretty shocking. Now, for the years before they finally fought, I was thinking for most of that time we were hypothesizing on how it would play out. I was thinking Errol Spence for most of those years would win against Terence Crawford. It wasn't until I saw Crawford stop Porter that I was thinking, damn, maybe Crawford does get the better of Errol Spence. And he ended up pretty much dominating and obliterating him. Performance of the year for 2023. But like I said, for some people, it will never be enough. There will be people who hate on any and every fighter for some reason or another. And I'm sure that if Terence Crawford beats Israil Madrimov here, there will be people who say, well, who the hell is Israil Madrimov anyway? Well, Israil Madrimov is a pretty damn good fighter. No, he's not, or probably not, the best fighter at 154. I still think that is actually Tim Tszyu, even though Tim Tszyu lost that bloodbath of a fight against Sebastian Fundora. But Madrimov, I think, is a solid, strong, probably a top 5 to top 7 154 guy. I mean, as it stands, this division is really loading up, and now we've got Virgil Ortiz, who's about to fight Bohachuk. This is an exciting, division. You still have Jesus Ramos, who lost that controversial fight against Erickson Lubin. You've got Erickson Lubin. You've got Sebastian Fundora. You've still got, I don't know if we've got Jermell Charlo. I'm not sure what's up with the former undisputed champion Jermell Charlo, nor am I sure what's up with Brian Castano. But you've got a lot of players at 154, and Madrimov, I look at this as he won the belt in a vacant title fight against Magomed Korbanov, right? And Korbanov, I thought, was going to win the fight. I thought that Korbanov had the better resume going into the fight with Madrimov. Korbanov had beaten Michael Soro. Michael Soro was a fighter from the Ivory Coast who was a 154, kind of lower part of the top 10. Like if you looked at the ring rankings for a lot of the last few years, you would see Michael Soro. And in his profile pic on Ring's, website, he looked a little bit like Charlemagne the God, but you would see him ranked number 9 or 10 at 154. Well, Korbanov beat Michael Soro in 2023. Madrimov, by the way, also beat Michael Soro. They fought twice. The second time it was stopped in the 3rd round and ended up being a draw. But the first time they fought, Madrimov stopped Michael Soro. So that was kind of the big boost to Madrimov's reputation. But yeah, Korbanov, he had beaten Patrick Teixeira, former belt holder in the division. That was the guy who Xander Zayas just fought. And that was also the guy that Brian Castano beat to earn a share of the 154-pound title. So Korbanov had beaten Patrick Teixeira, Michael Soro, and Liam Smith heading into the fight with Madrimov. But when you saw Madrimov versus Korbanov, which took place, I want to say, on the Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou undercard, it looked like a totally non-competitive fight. I was blown away. Like, I thought that was truly a 50-50 fight, but Madrimov was just dominating Korbanov. He looked quicker, he looked stronger, he looked lighter on his feet, he looked more athletic. Korbanov looked like he couldn't get out of first gear. He looked like he was walking in mud against Madrimov. So Madrimov ended, it didn't even take but 5 rounds for him to stop Korbanov. So it's not like this was like a split decision win. Madrimov destroyed Kurbanov. So I don't know if that was just a huge underperformance or if something happened to Kurbanov. I don't know if it was a bad weight cut, but Kurbanov didn't look like himself against Madrimov, and Madrimov just ran away with that one. So that's the guy who Terence Crawford's gonna have to handle in his 154-pound debut. So Crawford right now appears to be angling to try to fight Canelo, right? Look, I'm personally pretty interested in that fight. Yes, I want to see Canelo fight Benavidez. I'm going to do another video on that whole situation. It's kind of maddening, and it's exhausting being frustrated with it. But I do want to see Terence Crawford see if he can beat Canelo. I feel like if anybody's like earned the opportunity or the right or whatever to be able to go up multiple divisions, which usually doesn't go well. Didn't go well for Kell Brook against Triple G. Didn't go well for Amir Khan against Canelo. Didn't go well for Jermell Charlo against Canelo. Didn't go well for Mikey Garcia against Errol Spence. It usually turns out pretty disastrous for the guy who's going up multiple divisions. But if anybody really has earned the right to do that, besides somebody like Canelo, or if Naya Inoue wanted to go up to like featherweight or something, although I don't think he would go up to like 130 and fight a top-ish guy there. I mean, it sounds a little bit crazy, right, that Crawford's coming from 147 right now and that he would be meeting Canelo at 168. But I would be curious to see how those styles would go together, because it's not like there's like a 6-inch height gap. It's not like Canelo fighting Dimitri Bivol, right? I just wonder if Crawford would be able to kind of adapt to a sustained attack to the body, because even if Crawford's not the hardest guy to hit, but Canelo's not like a slow puncher, but I don't know if the speed gap would be that crazy between Crawford and Canelo. Look, I could try to analyze this fight on another day. I'd be happy to on the next live chat, but I do think about a lot of things and wonder how successfully Crawford could adapt to Canelo, because Canelo himself is usually able to adapt. And like, who would win the jab battle between the two? Would Crawford spend most of the fight in the southpaw stance? All these things are up for question. But in terms of Crawford versus Madrimov is he's a switch like Crawford is. I've seen Madrimov fight certain fights as much or nearly as much in the southpaw stance as he does in the orthodox. Now with Crawford, who's now going to be a year removed from the Errol Spence fight and who's turning 37 in September, you look at the history of welterweights or people who are in that welterweight to middleweight range. Look at where their career was at 35, 36. I mean, Floyd, I believe, beat Canelo at 36, and Triple G fought well up until nearly 40. But Crawford on his way to 37 years old, I don't love that. I know he takes great care of himself, but when you're fighting like the elite guys or younger, bigger guys, like I'm not sure how I feel about that. But Madrimov is 29 years old. He's still undefeated, so he doesn't know how to lose as a professional. I mean, did you know, by the way, like back in the amateurs in 2017, he lost to Troy Isley, the top-ranked prospect contender-ish fighter who's been fighting on a lot of undercards at middleweight. So Madrimov is he's about 5'8.5", so he's nearly the same height as Terence Crawford. Crawford's actually got the reach advantage. We're talking 74-inch reach, where Crawford's got an abnormally long reach for his height. Madrimov's got a 68.5-inch reach. But when it comes to Crawford and his switching, I have long believed, and it was actually first my dad who suggested it as we were watching either him against Amir Khan or him against Mean Machine, or it was before the Kell Brook fight. But the idea was that Crawford, for a long time, has been better as a southpaw than he is in orthodox. Like, there are a lot of fights that you could point to where the fight starts and Crawford looks like he's more or less kind of neutralized, like he's fighting on even terms with his opponent from the orthodox stance. And then he switches to southpaw and then something changes. He's able to open up different dimensions of offense. Like when he arguably lost the first 2 rounds against the very fast and very good Kell Brook, well, Crawford switched to southpaw late in the second and into the 3rd round. And then he stops him in the 4th round with his lead hand, his lead right hand, where it was kind of like a jabbish short hook type of a punch. Well-timed, Kell Brook totally didn't see it. But again, there are a lot of fights that you could point to where Crawford starts orthodox, doesn't look super spectacular, switches to southpaw, and then again, he's able to get things flowing. But when he fought Errol Spence, he started the fight as a southpaw. That was kind of breathtaking. I was like, oh, whoa, okay, we're gonna start the fight off from a southpaw stance. So I wonder if Crawford's gonna start this one against Madrimov, start it off in orthodox and then switch to southpaw, which again, he does it brilliantly. When a lot of people try to do that whole switch thing, they do it for offensive reasons, but what they often neglect is, oh, I don't know how to defend myself from this other stance. So while it does help a lot of fighters' offense out, it leaves them vulnerable in a lot of cases to get hit by hard shots. I mean, look at Francis Ngannou when he switched to southpaw against Anthony Joshua. Within seconds of that switch, he got hurt badly, and that was like the beginning of the end for Ngannou against AJ. Granted, Ngannou's not a professional boxer, but you even see a lot of pro boxers try switching to their non-natural stance and then start getting hit more because, yes, they are able to fight well offensively because the other guy's not ready for the angles defensively, but that guy who switches from southpaw to orthodox or vice versa isn't ready to handle the angles based on where they are now positioned to defend themselves. Terence Crawford is good enough to actually pull it off and not be totally vulnerable defensively. Madrimov, at least to this point, has appeared to be able to do the same thing. Granted, not against the same caliber of fighters that Crawford's been fighting, but again, Crawford is going to be the newcomer, the guest in this division. So how good of a shot does Madrimov really have? I know Eddie Hearn is saying, is really thinking that this is going to be an upset and that Madrimov is going to win. At least that's what he's saying. I don't know if he really believes that, but that's what he's putting out there. I tend to believe that Madrimov, no, he's not a nobody. So if Crawford mops the floor with Madrimov, yes, we will get people like, who is Madrimov? But I think Madrimov is better than the doubters think that he is. But I don't think that he's as good as some people who, they like the new name that comes in that they're not familiar with, who's got an undefeated record, who's looking impressive, who just stopped Kurbanov in 5 rounds. I don't necessarily think that Madrimov is that damn good either. I think that he's somewhere in between, but I think that him somewhere in between will still be good enough to give Terence Crawford some issues. I don't think there's going to be a visible speed gap. Like, I don't think that Terence Crawford is going to be observably faster than Madrimov. Now, his timing might be better than Madrimov, and he might catch him on the way in, things like that, or follow him after an exchange and catch him on the way out. But I don't think that it's going to be apparent in the first couple of rounds that one guy is vastly superior to the other. I think that Terence Crawford is stronger than his welterweight and his lightweight and his 140-pound body would suggest. He seems like a very physically strong guy. But when you're going up in weight, not only is there a question of how your power is going to carry up a division, but it's also a question of how well you can absorb the shot from the opponent. Like, can Crawford take a solid 154 punch as well as he could at 147? We've seen him rocked a couple of times. We saw him rocked against Gamboa at 135. We saw him rocked against Mean Machine Kavaliauskas at 147. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Crawford at some point in this fight gets hurt against Madrimov. Now, Terence Crawford does have this ability to kind of, I'm wearing this Bill Evans shirt. Bill Evans was Miles Davis's pianist who's got a great solo career by himself and with his own trio, Bill Evans, but he's a jazz musician, one of the greatest jazz pianists ever. And I'm wearing this shirt because I see Terence Crawford as being kind of a jazzy boxer, to use a term from online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer. Like, Richard Dwyer refers to certain boxers as having like a jazzy element. I think that he said that Billy Joe Saunders is a little bit of a riffer. Well, Terence Crawford, fight over fight, isn't always the same guy. In fact, he's hardly ever the same guy. You've got like 6 to 8 variations of Terence Crawford. But one thing about Terence Crawford that does seem consistent is once he starts making his reads, when he wants to put his foot on the gas and really hurt the guy, he really hurts the guy. And as the guy is starting to throw his punches, it seems like Crawford is able to react with exactly the right response, to throw the exact right 2 to 4 punches, to land super flush, super cleanly, to where all of a sudden it changes the complexion of the entire fight. Crawford seems to have this innate ability to do that, and I'm wondering if Madrimov is going to run into some heat that drops him and maybe even stops him. If Terence Crawford stops Madrimov in his 154-pound debut, boy, with that springboard, the appetite for a Canelo versus Terence Crawford fight. Now, if Terence Crawford beats Madrimov and it's like 7 rounds to 5 or 8 rounds to 4 and it's kind of a tough fight, I think that most of us will walk away from that fight thinking, yeah, Crawford probably doesn't have a great shot against Canelo, and it would lessen the appetite for Canelo versus Crawford. But I do think that this fight between Crawford and Madrimov is going to feature some deep waters. I think it's going to get difficult for Crawford in spots, or at least, if not difficult, it'll be like uncertain who won certain rounds, to where it doesn't appear that Crawford is like pulling away on the scorecard, and it seems like he's really in a fight, and he's either being matched with hand speed or being matched with power, and it's going to appear difficult for Crawford. But I think that there will come a point in like the middle rounds where he hurts Madrimov, and I think that he will eventually get to Madrimov, where yes, Madrimov's going to be coming in with a lot of spirit, a lot of heart. He's a gutsy fighter, but I think that Crawford will hurt the Uzbek champion in this case, and that he will eventually stop Madrimov like in rounds 8 through 10. And I think that this might be one of those fights where Madrimov is looking pretty sharp, looking pretty good. Like maybe he's hitting Crawford with some flashy shots and Crawford's getting caught pretty cleanly, and it's like, whoa, what are we dealing with? And it doesn't look like Crawford immediately has the solution, has the answer to this. But I think that as the rounds go on, he will develop those answers. And I think that this fight will likely result in a stoppage. Again, rounds 8 through 10, but it's going to be one of those stoppages where it's unclear maybe who was winning on the scorecards at the time of the stoppage. Like, you know, against Sean Porter. Sean Porter was arguably up or close or tied, whatever, through maybe 8 or 9 rounds. You know, it wasn't very clear until, you know, the 10th round stoppage who was going to be winning that fight, because Porter, at least to my eyes, won a few of those rounds. I feel like this might take on something like that. Now, style-wise, Madrimov isn't the same type of fighter as Sean Porter. Sean Porter is always just bringing it. He's in your chest, giving you no reprieve. You're going to be throwing punches and having to deal with him for like the whole round and every round of the fight. Madrimov is a little bit, he likes to operate at range. He likes to throw from a distance. Yes, he could also fight up close, but he trusts his ability to outbox you and to throw the sharper, harder, quicker, cleaner shots at range. So I think that it's possible that Madrimov could extend the success that Kell Brook was having in the first couple of rounds throughout more rounds of this fight. But again, I trust Crawford's ability to make those adaptations, make those adjustments, start putting his foot on the gas and catch Madrimov with something hard, and then eventually drop or stop Madrimov. Again, I'm looking at rounds 8 through 10 here. But again, I wouldn't be totally surprised if this fight is even more competitive than I think it's going to be. Crawford is 36 and within months of turning 37. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight. I think that this has a lot of intrigue to it. We don't know what 154-pound Crawford is going to perform like. And yeah, overall this card, I was thinking about going to the fight, still am thinking about getting tickets late in the game to this August 3rd showdown in Los Angeles. Actually, this is a part of Riyadh season, but it's Riyadh's intro into the California market. Now, life-wise, there's been a lot going on with me, in full disclosure, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the live chats, but we're expecting our first is on the way, less than 2 months away. And we are also house hunting. So there's been a lot going on personally that has kind of lessened my output a little bit, over the past couple of weeks at least. But I am thinking about going to this fight. I'm going to look at, how the ticket prices kind of evolve over the next few days, and I'm going to make my decision late in the game. But this is a very stacked fight card. I was really hoping that we also got Tim Tszyu versus Vergil Ortiz Jr. on this one, but they pulled Tim Tszyu out of it because that cut still hasn't fully healed. And for a minute, they were talking about Tim Tszyu versus Erickson Lubin. It looks like that's not happening either. It looks like Team Lubin isn't making this one happen at this point. And as I mentioned, a week after this fight on August 3rd, so that'll be August 10th, we're going to get Vergil Ortiz against Sergey Bohachuk, which I'm really looking forward to. But this fight card has Jared Anderson versus Martin Bakole. I think that there's a lot of excitement and intrigue in that one. We've also got the return of Andy Ruiz against Jarrell Big Baby Miller. This is just an interesting and exciting fight card, and I will preview more fights from this card in the days to come. But yeah, I'm taking Terence Crawford. I think it's going to be a very competitive fight, but I think that Crawford not only wins, but I think that his knockout streak continues, and I think that he's going to stop Madrimov somewhere between rounds 8 through 10. But let me know what you think about Crawford versus Madrimov. What do you think of the landscape right now in the 154-pound division? How do you see this, picture shaping up? And who do you think is going to win this fight and how? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And do you think Crawford would have a legit shot against Canelo? Let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.